drive of the newly launched Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. All you need to know about the 1.5-litre Brezza and the many launches and unveils from this week. Hi, welcome to Overdrive. You're watching the show with me, Soini Dutt. Now, it's not every day that Jeep would call us exclusively to drive one of the most hardcore off-roaders, the Wrangler Rubicon in the country. It's just been launched, in fact, and we took this on some very treacherous terrain, and trust me, we actually ran out of technical terrain to test the car before testing all of its capabilities. Now, the Wrangler Rubicon costs around 10 lakh more than the Wrangler Sahara, and it's time for us to find out whether that is a better buy.
The Rubicon isn't an all-new Wrangler, it just builds on the capabilities of the Sahara launched earlier, which means it benefits from the same new frame, new engine, aluminium doors and hood, and the subtle styling changes that came with the new Wrangler JL generation. On the Rubicon, you'd spot the black fenders instead of body-colored ones, the decals on the hood, lack of side steps for better off-road clearance, the smaller 17-inch wheels, and the larger 33-inch BF Goodrich KM2 rubber, an off-roader's favorite world over. The Rubicon sits about 10 mm higher with laden ground clearance rated at 217 mm or 2 mm more than the Sahara. Don't worry about that yet though, since the Rubicon's aces up its sleeve are the heavier duty Dana 44 front axle, electronically locking differentials front and rear, and the trickiest of them all, electronically disconnecting front sway bars. This gives each of the front wheels up to 25% more articulation. The Rubicon also runs much lower gearing when its transfer case is locked in 4 low, a 4.1:1 crawl ratio versus the Sahara's 2.72:1. All this apart from the marginally improved approach, departure and breakover angles courtesy the increased clearance and uprated shock absorbers. Internationally, the Sahara is the most luxurious Wrangler you can buy, and the Rubicon is specced out with all the same creature comforts and features. The differences being the red inserts on the leather-wrapped dashboard and the leather upholstery. Except now there's no side step to help you climb into the cabin, but hey, jumping into and out of your Rubicon just solidifies the Jeep experience. The overall feeling is of a cabin that's exceedingly well put together. Out on a trail, you really appreciate the Wrangler's spot-on driving position and the excellent visibility all around. Not to mention the pings from the parking sensors all around the Wrangler, which help give you an idea of how much clearance you have when you're tackling tough sections. And always a cool feature to see are the dedicated off-road pages on the 8.4-inch Uconnect infotainment system, which tell you just how far you're pushing your Rubicon. So when we first drove the new gen Wrangler on road, we were super impressed with the performance from its 2-litre turbo petrol. We were a little worried, how would a petrol engine, and that too a relatively small capacity engine, cope with a vehicle that's the size and weight of the Wrangler? Well, we needn't have been worried because it's got a pretty explosive performance on road. We got really surprising road test figures for it, both in the performance figures and its efficiency. Now, off the road, of course, is where the Rubicon really comes into its own. It's got those trick gadgetries that we told you about. The main thing being the electronic lockers for the front and rear differentials, and the ability to disconnect the sway bars on the front of the car. Of course, this is an automatic system which does it on the fly, which is something that you don't get from a lot of aftermarket systems, and of course you run into your own bunch of problems with that. So what it allows it to do is the suspension travel on the front of the car gets 25% more give. And what that means is, when you're in a particularly tricky situation with the sway bar disengaged, your wheel will actually articulate way more than the normal Wrangler can to give you the traction that you need to get out of it, which means it's especially good over rocky and boulders basically. Of course, like we said, Beauty of the Rubicon is just how effortless it makes it all. I'm about to get into a steep descent with an uneven surface, a loose uneven surface, with a deep drop on one side, and obviously with the articulation that the car has stock, it's really a piece of cake. We watched a couple of the instructors do this route, and honestly we didn't really hear the engine rise in pitch at all, which is surprising. You think a 2-liter turbo petrol, it would need some amount of throttle for it to get over the rough stuff, but this thing feels like it's just ticking over above idle and clambering over everything you throw at it. Of course, I've left the gearbox in automatic. It's pretty much made up its own mind that it needs to stay in that really low final drive gear ratio that it has, that allows it to stay in first. And it's intelligent enough to keep it there even if the revs do get high, especially if you've got to cover a bit of distance in between the obstacles that you've got. With a steep incline coming up, all you really got to do is watch for your spotter's hands. He's going to help you out, tell you which direction to turn your wheels, and put it into 4 low and sit back as the Wrangler takes care of the rest. I don't know if you can hear it, but the engine's pretty much at 1500 RPM right now. That's how effortless it is. You have the parking sensors helping you out or hindering you depending on how you look at it. Obviously you do have a little bit of overhang in the front that you've got to be aware of. So the parking sensors help a hell of a lot in that case. Of course, the low-end performance of the Wrangler could be a potential question if you're wondering about that 2-liter turbo petrol and that 8-speed automatic off-road. But the response from right off idle is so immense that you will hardly find yourself going above 1500 RPM when you're on the trail, and that includes climbing up steep inclines. That's really saying something about the capability of these Jeep Wranglers and how far they've come. Where the earlier JKs, you would still have people making up for some of its shortcomings by saying, you know what, it's a Jeep thing. Well, the gel fixes all of that. While there's no escaping the fact that the Wrangler Sahara is itself far too expensive for its own good, there is also no alternative for someone with deep pockets who wants a new off-roader that can take a beating and is pretty comfortable. Between the two really, the Rubicon seems like the better bet, and of course it comes with ultimate bragging rights.
The deliveries of the Wrangler Rubicon will start from the 15th of March, and since this vehicle is being brought in via the CBU route, it will lock horns with the Land Rover Defender, which stands at 69.99 lakh rupees extra. Back here watching Overdrive. Now, the Maruti Suzuki Vitara Brezza is petrol only, and that's all thanks to the upcoming emission norms. Everyone's favorite 1.3-litre oil burner has been replaced by the 1.5-litre petrol engine that you already see in the Ciaz and the Ertiga. There are some styling changes as well and some new features added. We got a chance to drive this in Goa. Let's take a look whether the Brezza still retains its magic.
The facelift most noticeably brings with it signature LED DRLs that double up as turn signal indicators. A closer look reveals the new chrome bar grille, LED projector headlamps, LED fog lamps, re-profile bumpers and skid plates, and new 16-inch wheels with machined faces. You're likely to think the most modern end of the Brezza is in fact its rear, with the striking LED taillights pulling more than their weight, though a couple of new colors and contrast roof options try as well. So when it comes to the cabin of the updated Brezza, it's just as comfortable, spacious and functional as it ever was. Now with that, it feels like Maruti did miss an opportunity to actually just take the cabin of the Brezza a little bit further. So they have the same old black and white multi-information display between the dials,
I feel like they could have included a color display like they have on some of the other cars. I feel like a sunroof would have been a very valuable addition, especially since people seem to be in love with it, despite the weather that we have. The good thing is, the few updates that they have made in the form of the leather-wrapped steering wheel does make a tangible difference to the perceived quality of the cabin. They also have an auto-dimming IRVM and electronically folding ORVMs, which just make the Brezza a little bit easier to live with.
That being said, the Brezza's cabin is as spacious and comfortable as one would remember. The front seats being better than the rear, which could have used a more relaxed angle of recline and a little bit more under-thigh support. And while the inclusion of a cooled upper glove box is nice, rear AC vents would have been far nicer.
We know, a lot of you are not very happy about the Brezza not having a diesel engine anymore. But the 1.5 litre petrol that now finds home under the hood of the refreshed Brezza is quite a nice motor. We've also experienced it in the Ciaz and in the new Ertiga, and like in those cars, Maruti is offering it with the choice of a 5-speed manual transmission and a 4-speed automatic. What's different though is that Maruti has equipped their smart hybrid system on only the automatic variant of the Brezza. That's probably in the interest of cost cutting. And does it make a difference to how the car drives? Well, it's hard to say unless we do a proper road test of it. I think the big question on everyone's minds is moving from a 1.3 litre diesel to a 1.5 litre petrol, larger displacement but less torque. How's that going to work out? Well, this 1.5 litre petrol does have more power on its side. Of course, it's built a lot higher up the rev range, but the good thing is, if you weren't a big fan of how that 1.3 litre diesel gave you that big shove of power at about 2000 RPM, which could be a little hard to modulate, especially when you're in the city and you're driving bumper to bumper, well, the petrol is a lot easier to drive in the city, and you are not going to miss that extra torque that the diesel had. This engine, by virtue of its displacement, is perfectly easygoing for most situations. Like we've said before, the only issue that we have with this 1.5 litre engine and 5-speed manual transmission is the fact that it's a 5-speed manual. Maruti, that doesn't cut it any longer, especially when you're out on the highway and the engine's sounding just a little hassle at 3000 RPM at a steady cruising speed of 100 kmph. And that can't mean good things for fuel efficiency as well, though Maruti claim a pretty astonishing 17 kmpl for the manual transmission Brezza and 18.7 kmpl for the automatic. And that's because it has a smart hybrid system. How does it work? Well, let's jump into the automatic and see.
The 4-speed torque converter is a gearbox that prefers smooth inputs and a relaxed pace, and it reacts accordingly. While perfectly capable in the city with smooth shifts being a plus point, overtakes will need some extra planning to give the gearbox that extra second to respond. The gearbox's 2 and L modes help when you're driving uphill, keeping the gearbox in a lower gear to give you that torque when you need it.
In going from diesel to petrol, the Brezza has lost a little bit of weight, and importantly, that weight has been lost over the front wheels, which means that when you enter a corner and you're trailing the brakes just a little bit, there's the perfect balance between front and rear to get a nice agile turn in. And these are not usually words that you would associate with a compact SUV. And if the previous diesel Brezza was one of our handling favorites, the new one I think is going to blow a lot of people's socks off.
Now, the Brezza may seem a little pricey, especially when you consider the automatic variants are about ₹1.5 lakh more than the manuals. But apart from offering the largest capacity petrol engine here, the Brezza doesn't offer much that stands out from its competition unless you count its spaciousness. Of course, the fact that it outsells the competition helps, and the new petrol package is as convincing as ever.
Since its arrival in the Indian market, the Brezza has enjoyed some immense success in the country, and I have very little doubts that the petrol engine will bring down those popularity numbers. On that note, let's take a quick look at this week's Servo Perfect driving tip. Here are a couple of pointers to keep in mind when you have to send your car for service. Make sure you change your oil filter along with the engine oil. If the oil filter is not changed regularly, dust particles tend to remain in the oil filter, which can lower your mileage considerably. Get the coolant level checked as per the standard requirement. Every 15 to 20,000 kilometers, get your engine tuned, as many engine components can rust with time. It's been a pretty busy week for many manufacturers. Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. Now, India has been more than ready for a light, more powerful and more feature-rich Africa Twin, which has launched finally in the country earlier this week. Now, at the sidelines of the launch, Rohit also got a chance to catch up with this year's Dakar Rally winner, Ricky Brabec, who now holds the distinction of being the first American to win at Dakar Rally and also bring Honda its first victory that has eluded the team for 31 years.
So here it is, the new CRF 1100L Africa Twin Adventure Sport. Now, as you are aware, there are two variants of this bike. There is the base variant and the Adventure Sport, and within the Adventure Sport there is the one with the regular suspension and one with the electronic suspension, and that is the one that has come to India. It evolves the design of the CRF 1000, makes it a little more aggressive. The headlamps are new, the detailing of the LEDs, the daytime running lights, all of that is new. So these are LED headlamps, of course. And what you see here, right below, this is the cornering light function, something that the touring community will definitely appreciate a lot. You also get a new tail lamp design, you also get a new exhaust design. And if you look closely, via spoke wheels, you'll see the spokes laced to the outside. So these now come with the Metzeler Karoo Street. The tire sizes, the wheel sizes remain the same as the 1000. You have an 18-incher at the back and a 21-incher at the front. And the heart of the matter, the new engine. This one is an 1100, 1084cc to be precise. And now it puts out 102 PS of power, 105 Newton meters of torque. So those magical figures are there. It's not the same output as before. It has grown on the output. It is more powerful. It is stockier. And what you see here is the dual clutch transmission, but the big news is you can also have it with a manual. So this is a 6.5-inch screen, and the beauty of it, it's a touchscreen system. It's also Apple CarPlay compatible. And there, that's the urban mode, the tour mode, user 2, user 1, off-road mode, and gravel mode. Unfortunately, no electronic suspension on the India spec model. You get the manually adjustable suspension setup. This is a Showa setup, 45mm forks up front, 230 millimeters of travel, since we are on the topic of suspension, whereas the rear shocker, it gives you 220 millimeters of travel, and it is also manually adjustable. You have an option of choosing between the manual or the automatic. The manual is 15.35 lakh rupees ex-showroom pan-India. The automatic is 16.1 lakh rupees ex-showroom pan-India. Bookings have opened already. I believe 50,000 rupees is the booking amount, and the deliveries begin in May 2020. We are here with Ricky Brabec. Is that right?
Yep.
That's how you pronounce it?
That's how you do it.
He's the winner of the 2020 Dakar, the first American to do it. And there's the first time he's coming to India. Has it sunk in that you've won the 2020 Dakar?
I mean, yeah, it's sunk in, but I'm not going to let it get to me. You know, it's just a race. It's a big race, don't get me wrong, but there's always more. There's always more to do. There's always areas to improve. So yeah, it's really cool to be the first American. Really cool to be on Honda and break the KTM streak. But like I said, there's always, someone is always working harder than you.
Speaking about training, you mentioned that you had some really hardcore training in the Mojave Desert going into 2020 Dakar. So how was the learning experience, and was there something new that you learned out of the new team and the new setup altogether?
The way I train is just brutal, it's gnarly. So, I just learned to appreciate the sufferfest that my trainer puts me through. And, when we went to Dakar, it was it seemed so easy. So I really thank him for that. I had days where I hated it, but in the Dakar, it just seemed so easy, and I was really, really happy.
So results aside, Were there any hairy moments through the race, through the 2020 Dakar?
Yeah, Dakar is hairy every single day. You know, there's always scary situations. So over the years, you just learn to prepare, and you learn like what to expect, and you learn like the dangers that are out there, and you learn to overcome them all. And that's part of training. You know, for me, that's part of training. I learned to overcome the bad situations. So, you know, the way I train is really unique, and obviously it's paid off.
What do you think about the new recommendations that have come through for the norms and the regulations for 2021 Dakar?
Like slowing our bikes down?
Yeah.
I think that's the stupidest thing that they could ever do. Slowing the bikes down isn't that bad, but it's putting the restrictor on the air intake. That's, so in my opinion, that's so much more dangerous than having our bikes with full power. Just because if you restrict the airflow, then it's going to have a bog out, and having a bog out can drop the front end and make you crash even harder. So maybe top speed, if that was restricted, that's maybe okay, but putting a restrictor on our air intake is the worst thing that the Dakar organization could ever do.
Okay, I hope it doesn't go through. I hope that doesn't happen, and you have a great 21 Dakar.
Yeah,
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Take care.
In India, Mercedes-Benz launched the facelifted GLC Coupe SUV at 62.7 lakh rupees for the petrol variant and 63.7 lakh rupees for the diesel SUV. Both versions can be had with the 2-year unlimited kilometer Star Ease maintenance packages. The GLC 300 petrol is powered by a 2-litre inline 4-cylinder M264 motor, and in its more powerful state of tune now, it makes 258 PS of max power and 370 Nm of max torque. This gets the coupe SUV from 0 to 100 km per hour in 6.3 seconds and clocks a 240 km per hour top speed. The GLC 300D does this run in 6.6 seconds and can reach 233 km per hour. This version is powered by the OM654 2-litre inline 4-cylinder diesel that makes 245 PS of max power and 500 Nm of torque. Both options come paired with a new 9G-tronic 9-speed automatic torque converter. The 2020 GLC Coupe now houses the MBUX infotainment system, which uses AI-based voice commands, and the Mercedes Me suite of connected car features. After catching a glimpse of the SUV at the Auto Expo, Volkswagen India has launched the Tiguan All-Space at an introductory price of 33.12 lakh rupees ex-showroom. The Tiguan All-Space gets a 2-litre petrol engine with a power output of 190 PS and 320 Nm of torque, paired with a 7-speed DCT and all-wheel drive. The Tiguan All-Space boasts of 1274 litres of boot space and gets a standard panoramic sunroof. It also debuts a digital instrument cluster, along with which the car gets electrically adjustable driver seat with memory function, ambient lighting, chrome interior package and a cooled glove box. The All-Space now competes with the Honda CR-V and the Skoda Kodiaq. In other news, Mercedes-Benz has revealed its 5th generation E-Class range, including the sedan and the all-terrain estate. The W213 E-Class has almost been cosmetically revamped in its midlife update and now sports an all-new steering wheel, 10.25-inch displays on the dashboard, and a host of driver assist systems also make their way to enhance safety. Electrification has led to the first 4-cylinder petrol engine getting a 48-volt on-board electrical system with the integrated starter generator that offers 20 PS more power and an additional 180 Nm of torque. The new E-Class will be offered with a 2-litre petrol and diesel engine options, along with a 3-litre 6-cylinder petrol and diesel engines. We expect Mercedes-Benz to launch the E-Class in India by the end of this year. On the same day as the E-Class unveiled, the 4th generation Audi A3 Sportback also made its global debut. The A3 now gets subtle sporty design cues, and on the inside it gets a new shifter, carbon or aluminium inlays, black instrument panel and seat upholstery made of PET bottles for the first time. The car will be available with a 1.5-litre TFSI engine and a 2-litre TDI engine that puts out 116 PS of power or 150 PS of power. The initial phase of cars will have a front-wheel drive, and there will be a choice of 6-speed manual transmission or the quick-shifting 7-speed S-Tronic.
Audi plans to explore further with the engine options and include an electric drivetrain with Quattro.
Well, that's it then from us on this week's episode of Overdrive. But remember, you can drop in a comment on our Facebook page or on Twitter. You can follow our latest videos on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already, and you can follow our latest updates on Instagram as well. Until we see you next week, please travel safe.